Hello and welcome. Occidental College's Young Initiative on the Global Political Economy was thrilled to host Professor Michelle Jurkovich of UMass Boston to discuss her new book on anti-hunger advocacy at the global level. Professor Jurkovich's work highlights an essential component of human rights campaigns, the importance and difficulty of assigning responsibility for rights violations. Please enjoy her talk on global campaigns for the human right to food.
So this chart was put together by the FAO before COVID. The assumption that hunger rates were increasing and would increase up through 2030, both in terms of the prevalence rates, so the percentage of the global population who is deemed to be undernourished, and also in terms of the number of people who are undernourished. As an estimate, usually the FAO will say around now, you've got a little over 700 million people, or at least pre-COVID, were considered chronically undernourished. They are, depending on the indicator that you use, depending on which method you use, you get a wildly different estimate of hunger rates in a given country. So it's problematic, and we can talk about that. But in any event, regardless of the indicator you use, we know that hunger is a serious problem. Chronic hunger is a serious problem internationally. And we know that attributions of responsibility are unclear. And it's puzzling also because, despite this, the right to food is pretty clear in international law. So we know both in terms of who is obligated, what actor is obligated, and some degree of specificity on what they should do, not super precise, but some degree, is embedded in a number of the international human rights instruments that are core for other human rights issue areas, but for some reason are generally not paid attention to with the food case. And so the book looks at this kind of wide array of different types of campaigns that have very different understandings of blame and responsibility. Some advocacy organizations blame the private sector, some blame international financial institutions, some blame outside states for emitting greenhouse gases, linking hunger and climate change. Some blame poor quality food aid. That would be the MSF Starve for Attention campaign. Others, like the FAO, don't really care about blaming any particular actor and go with just a strong emotive 1 billion are hungry as I'm mad as hell campaign. And so the book is interested then in explaining how we can get this type of advocacy space in an issue area where there is a clear understanding of responsibility in law. A lot of the assumptions we make when we talk about human rights advocacy in particular, they're good assumptions for many human rights cases. And there are a number of models that build off of this, but have similar core tenets. And the assumptions are this: if you have a human rights campaign, you can have agreement, or we assume you will have agreement between international and domestic NGO groups and outside states and international organizations on who's to blame when when there is a violation of that right. And that we should assume that if there is a violation in, say, state A in the model, that we can the international and the local NGO groups and outside states and outside actors can all focus pressure and agree on a common target violator in order to maximize our pressure as advocacy organizations and compel change. But this assumes that it's clear who the villain is when you're dealing with all human rights, and that blame can be centralized on one actor. And in the case of many economic and social rights, and food being one of them, that isn't clear. So the book puts forward a buckshot model, which it is a visual representation of the chaos that takes place in the advocacy community around the right to food. One of the things the book argues is that it is able to happen because of the normative environment in which activists are working. And so what I mean by that is that we can have an issue area that has a norm, meaning we have a standard of appropriate behavior for actors of a given identity. So we have a sense of oughtness, and we have an action from whom we expect from an actor. But not all issue spaces have a sense of oughtness and an actor and an action. So if you have a moral principle that hunger is wrong, you may have an outcome that you don't want and a sense of oughtness, but lack an actor. You don't know who's supposed to do anything to make that any different, right? And you would be in a realm of a normative space that provides some tools for activists, but not others. So in issue areas where there are already established norms, activists are able to use those norms to be able to compel change and apply pressure. But on issue areas that have lots of moral principles, hunger is wrong, children shouldn't go hungry in the modern age, these things may feel like norms, but they're not. And when you don't have the actor component, it facilitates and constitutes a different moral space. And in that moral space, activists work differently, and different tactics work and different tactics don't. And the book, in part, is about exploring why that matters.